Guys, Mr. Happy here, and today I want to start going over the patch 2.1 notes. As you can see, I'm still a mess from this morning from the live letter 11, but I want to go over some of the changes that we're seeing because these patch notes are massive, guys. There's no way I can make a single video covering all of the patch notes. It's just not gonna happen. I'm going to be live streaming my thoughts about these later, but I wanted to post out a video now to discuss about some of the things, but I'm going to throw some footage over this. It's not PvP footage, clearly, but it's not any kind of footage. I'm just going to throw footage over it. But the first thing I want to talk about are the following class changes. I think this is the one I can make a video about the quickest, so let's definitely run through that really quick. So first, we have the Paladin changes. Now, Paladin is getting a buff to both cover and Shield Oath. So, cover is having its range extended to 10 yalms, while Shield Oath's enmity generation has been increased. I don't really see why the enmity generation increase on Shield Oath is happening. I don't really see a need for it. The enmity generation of Paladin does is already okay, but it's probably more to bring it in line with Warrior's enmity changes to Defiance. So overall, I can't really complain. Cover, definitely a good buff because it's really hard to use. You have to be really close to the person currently for it to work, so I'm definitely happy for that. Now, Pugilist, we've been expecting a lot of changes to happen. So we're going to see some changes to Pugilist and Monk. So let's go over the Pugilist changes first. They're buffing Bootshine's potency to 150, which is definitely just to make sure that people want to actually use their rear combos, which I can definitely agree with. And now True Strike is definitely getting a huge buff. True Strike is now, instead of having an increased critical hit chance on True Strike, instead, if you deliver it from behind, the attack potency will be 190. That is definitely going to encourage people to use True Strike, to weave True Strikes in between what's the Twin Snakes. So, and we're actually going to get to another buff for that in a little bit. So let's go through the changes though. Internal release. Critical hit rate has been reduced from 20% to 10%. However, this change does not affect benefits granted by the trait Enhanced Internal Release. So basically, instead of being a 20% crit buff, which by the way is just ridiculously high, internal release, it's only going to be 10% now. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's a huge nerf to the ability, but in all honesty, 20% critical hit rate, considering it's a cross-class ability, it doesn't surprise me to see that. So those of you looking for bard nerfs, that's definitely one of them, but it's not a direct bard nerf, of course. People have been looking. That's definitely one of the changes they made, and part of that, and clearly they want to note that that is mostly because of bard. Because Enhanced Internal Release, they clearly want people to know that this was more targeted as a cross-class ability than a direct nerf to Monk. Twin Snake is having its duration extended to 15 seconds. This means that no longer do you require 491 skill speed in order to actually get your True Strikes in between your combo attacks. Doing True Strikes in between your Twin Snakes will now be a normal thing, which I think is good because True Strike was just so underused before because it had just such a high requirement for it to be a DPS increase. Very happy with these changes so far. Demolish, in addition to dealing damage over time, now delivers an attack with a potency of 30. It's 70 potency when attacking from behind. So Demolish now has a positional aspect to it, which is something that it did not have before. So now you actually need to deal Demolish from behind to do the most damage, and it does additional damage even if you don't do it from behind. So overall, these are some great buffs going to Pugilist. Now, they are, however, buffing Greased Lightning, which is, in my opinion, ridiculous that they're buffing Greased Lightning. Damage bonus has been increased from 7% to 9%. Damage bonus has been... Greased Lightning 3, basically, you get 27% bonus damage, which is just ridiculous how strong that is. Monks were already really strong. Monks just became #1 with that. And you know what? I'll say that now. But let's look at the rest of the changes before we get into, is this overpowered, is this too much? I have a feeling it'll get toned down back to 7% in a later patch, but for now, let's just take it as it is and move on. Now, there are going to be two changes to Monk. Shoulder Tackle is having its recast reduced to 30 seconds, and I think that's fair. Monk doesn't have any ranged attacks, and that's their only gap closer. So I guess in terms of, I guess they realized people weren't really using it for the stunning aspect as much as they were as a gap closer. So giving it the shorter cooldown is definitely useful. Hopefully when we go down this list, we'll see that Dragoon had its recast time reduced on their gap closer as well. Otherwise, I think it's just silly to make this change for Monks and not Dragoons. They also had One Ilm Punch. It had its potency increased to 120, and this is probably a PvP change, to be honest, because One Ilm Punch doesn't really get used in PvE all that much. I don't know of a situation where it's actually useful yet, but the potency being increased to 120 definitely makes it more of a better choice in PvP, so that actually might be a PvP buff. Don't really want to see changes that have to do with PvP on these PvE abilities, though, but we don't know. It might just... Maybe there are going to be PvE bosses that one Ilm Punch is actually useful on at some point soon, and they don't want you to feel so... I guess sort of like you're losing too much damage if you have to use it. But that's it for the Pugilist and Monk changes. Now let's go on to Marauder and Warrior. Now, they had a misspelling here. It says Marauder and Defiance, but it's Marauder and Warrior. So Marauder, we know most of these changes. I see even more spelling mistakes on here. Oh, man. That's great. Let's make spelling mistakes on the 2.1 patch notes. So, what is this? Mercy Stroke is having its recast reduced. We knew this. Overpower is having its enmity increased. We knew this. They have a lot of spelling mistakes on here, guys, so excuse me if I trip over my words a little bit. Recast time has been reduced to... Oh, no. That's, their stun had its recast reduced to 20 seconds, and Mercy Stroke had it reduced to 40 seconds, so we knew that. Thrill of Battle is having its effect duration increased to 20 seconds. Storm's Path now also reduces the damage dealt by the enemies it hits by 10%, so it reduces damage taken, so it's definitely a good cooldown. Even as an off-tank, that's definitely a great cooldown to be using instead of Storm's Eye. Holmgang, range has been extended to 6 yalms. Enemies will now be pulled, and then you cannot die while under the effect. Players can now change the direction they are facing. So overall, just some quality of life things to Warriors and Marauders. Vengeance now reduces all incoming damage by 30% for 15 seconds. We knew this. Storm's Eye had its TP cost reduced to 60, so now all of the end combo abilities have that reduced cost. Now let's move on to the Warrior changes. Defiance is now have increased enmity, and the HP recovered mechanic of Wrath is being built into Defiance. So it's been removed from Wrath, the healing component, but you now have a flat 20% on your Warrior for the Defiance buff. Inner Beast had its HP recovery nerfed to only 100%, but it now also reduces the damage you take by 20% for 6 seconds. Really, really good. That's going to be getting you so much. Unchained also had its recast reduced to 120 seconds, which is a massive, massive buff, by the way. The amount of increased damage you do with Unchained is massive, and now having 60 seconds off that cooldown, it's going to get used so much more. Steel Cyclone now generates increased enmity. Good, because Steel Cyclone was just useless. I mean, we've known some of these changes for a while now, but it's just good to read them and see that they made it into the game with those iterations that they originally showed us. So that's it for Marauder and Warrior. Let's look at Lancer and Dragoon. Now, we know some of these changes have to do with the jumps, so nothing really too surprising here. Heavy Thrust is getting buffed. They're making it from 10% to 15% when you use it from the target's flank. So that's a 5% damage buff right there for Dragoons who are able to keep that buff up 100% of the time. It looks like they accidentally posted it twice. There's so many spelling errors here, man. I don't know what the second change is, what it was supposed to say, because all it says is, it says the exact same thing as Heavy Thrust 2 more times, so I'm going to skip that. Phlebotomize. Potency of the damage over time effect has been increased by 5, so it went from 20 to 25. That's good. Overall, it's a buff. Can't complain. It's more damage. I know it seems really minute, but over the course of an entire fight, that's actually pretty big. And I have an email, so I should probably fix that. Alright, next. Blood for Blood. Damage bonus has been reduced from 20% to 10%. However, it does not affect benefits granted from the enhanced trait Blood for Blood. So again, that really looks like they're targeting it as a cross-class skill. They just don't want it to be as strong as a cross-class skill. It's the same changes that they made to internal release. So overall, that's probably what they were doing with the Bard nerfs, but let's actually check the rest of the abilities, because I'm sure Bard had some changes. There's no way they just didn't change anything about Bard. Chaos Thrust. Potency when used as a combo action has been increased from 160 to 200. Potency of the damage over time effect has been increased from 20 to 30. Just an overall buff. The Chaos Thrust does more initial damage, and it does more damage over time. So both Phlebotomize and Chaos Thrust are now doing a lot more damage over the course of an entire fight. I'm sure Dragoons are going to love that. Definitely means they're going to do better with keeping up with damage, especially with the 5% buff on Heavy Thrust. Now, Dragoons themselves just had all of their animations changed, but I will note that Spine Shatter Dive and Dragonfire Dive both didn't have the recast change. So it seems that Shoulder Tackle, being on a 30-second cooldown, is now a draw of having a Monk. Since they have no range attacks at all, I guess they only saw it fitting to change Shoulder Tackle. And Power Surge, which is the, I believe that's the one that makes your next jump do double damage. Yeah. That's that one's, or increase it by 50% damage. That one's having its recast reduced to 60 seconds. So overall, Dragoon's getting a massive buff. Definitely looking forward to seeing more Dragoons played, because honestly, going into 2.0, it was one of my favorite jobs on my list. But then after seeing it played and the animations, I had no interest in it. So hopefully, we can see a lot more Dragoons in the future. Now, Archer had 2 changes. Pretty much. Okay, wait. Okay, never mind. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I was reading this correctly. So, Shadowbind had its recast time increased from 12 to 40 seconds. Guys, that is without a doubt a PvP change also. They know that a 12-second... I mean, granted, it lasts 10 seconds, and it's on a 12-second recast. In reality, it's pretty ridiculous as it is, but that is no doubt a PvP change, because 40 seconds is a really long time to not have that bind. Overall, though, it's an ability that doesn't see that much use outside of PvP, so can't say that I'm really that disappointed. I think it was put in the game primarily as a PvP ability with some PvE uses, but yeah, I really have no problem with that. It's a technical nerf, but not really a big deal. Now, Hawk's Eye actually got a buff, but it's a minuscule one at best. This effect has been changed to increase dex by 15% and guarantee that all attacks land. Now, that's a lot more specific, because before it increased physical accuracy, and Hawk's Eye is a cross-class ability. You know, black mages can use it, so I'm wondering if that means now that when a black mage uses Hawk's Eye, let's say if their accuracy isn't high enough and they would normally miss, now they have no chance of missing for all that time. It's very unclear exactly what it means for the use of the ability, but we may see it used as a cross-class ability more often now. Who knows? Now, this is very interesting. Bard did get a change to Reign of Death. Now, this is no doubt in change to the Warrior change. Now, the additional effect that has been changed from reducing enemy attack damage by 10% to reducing enemy evasion by 10%. Now, that is interesting, because this almost means that I'm going to be using it more. Because people are going to be like, well, I don't need accuracy as much. Bard can just Reign of Death. I hope that's not the case. I'm wondering if that means there's going to be some enemies with extremely high evasion that we can't hit an accuracy cap for with our current gear, or if it's mostly just a PvP change. I think it's a utility change. They did say Bards were able to do way too many things, and now that Warrior has that tool, I'm guessing they're kind of hoping that the Warrior using Storm's Path will make up for the Reign of Death changes. So overall, Bards did see some pretty hard nerfs. I mean, most of it was in the cross-class abilities, and then of course in their utility with Reign of Death. It doesn't seem like they're making any other changes to it though, so sorry Bards, you did get somewhat of a nerf. It is fairly significant. It's about what is it, 10% crit rate from your cooldowns and 10% overall damage, but it could have been much worse, guys. It really could have been. So this is not that bad. If you're playing a Bard, don't feel discouraged. You're still going to be plenty useful, trust me. Now, they made some changes to Conjurer on Cure 2, Cure 3, and Medica 2. The Cure 2 additional effect has been changed to a 15% chance that Cure 3 will cost half MP. And that's good, because I think that means they're listening to the community, where Cure 3 was sort of a bit of a problem MP-wise. Medica 2 just... Sure, the thing Medica 2 did is a lot of people claim it was more MP efficient. I'm going to say a lot of people claim. I'm not going to say I claim it. I don't play White Mage enough to know that for sure. And that Cure 3 was just the only reason it wasn't that useful was not just because of the range, but because of the MP. Now, the range still makes it a very niche use. I'm sure there are a lot of strategies that are going to evolve around using Cure 3 now, but overall, I think it's just a good change. I think Cure 3 definitely needed to see more use, and now it'll definitely see more use as an AoE heal whenever you get that Cure 3 proc, because half MP is a really, really big deal. Now, Cure 3 had its cast time reduced to 2 seconds, and it also had its range increased to make it more practical to use. So, definitely looking at buffs for Cure 3. I'm really happy with that, because now it's going to be extremely MP efficient in terms of AoE healing. Now, Medica 2, when I saw this was on the list, I was sure it was going to be a nerf, so let's read it. Potency of the regen effect has been reduced from 100 to 50, so the regen now literally does half as much, but the duration was doubled. So they basically just... It does the same amount of healing, just not over the same amount of time. So overall, it is a healing per second nerf. But overall, it just means you'll have to cast it less often. And so you can keep people Medica-2'd. You won't generate enmity as quickly, so that's a big change. Don't forget that with Medica 2. That means you won't generate enmity as quickly as you were before. And additionally, it means you don't have to cast Medica 2 as often, and you can focus on cures like Medica 1 and using Cure 3. So I think it just opens up a lot more room for more styled more skillful white mages to really shine and understand how their job works. And White Mage wholly had its potency nerfed down to 200. I'm sorry, White Mages. 200 potency is still really strong, but I can see why they did that, I guess. I'm still sad. Anyway, moving on to Thaumaturge and Black Mage, they did have some change. So, Thunder can now no longer be cast by summoners. That's a big deal. Summoners out there who had incorporated Thunder into their rotations, you will now have to take it out of your rotations entirely. Sorry for that. Now, Blizzard 2. Blizzard 2 had its potency reduced from 100 to 50, and the bind effect has been increased from 4 to 8 seconds, but it can now also be used by all disciples of magic. But the only Black Mages and Thaumaturges can get Umbral Ice. So they really, that's a PvP change. No doubt that's a PvP. That's a utility change. You know, I'm going to say that's more of a utility change. They really want people using Fire 2 and Flare for AoE situations. They don't want people just spamming Blizzard 2 because their MP is endless. And the bind effect was really underappreciated at 4 seconds, definitely. But the fact that all Disciples of Magic can now use it definitely show they want it to be a more utility-based and probably PvP-used ability. Overall, nerfs to Blizzard 2. Technically, so far, these are nerfs all around, but let's see what the next one is. Scathe. Potency reduced from 120 to 100. Really? Did that need to happen? Was Scathe really that strong that just because they could do it while running? I don't know. I guess I don't play Black Mage enough, but Scathe just seemed like a last resort move to do while on the move. It didn't seem like it needed a nerf to me, but maybe there were Black Mages who found out that by spamming Scathe while in Umbral Ice form, they were OP, and I'm just unaware of that. But overall, it's a nerf. Now, Freeze, on the other hand, had itself buffed, and it had its power shifted. Freeze had its potency increased to 100, so it now does actual damage, because potency of 20 is like, it's like 30 damage. But it had its casting time reduced to 3 seconds as well. So that actually made it more useful. Now it's definitely more viable as a utility. Don't know how useful, but I can see why they did it because of Tri-Disaster. I'm wondering if we're going to see a Tri-Disaster buff coming up because Arcanist is no, there's no summoner buffs, no summoner changes at all. So Freeze just got better, basically. I mean, the cast time being reduced is definitely useful, but the potency being increased kind of surprises me. I guess they figure if you're going to do the AoE bind, you might as well actually do some damage in the process. Moving on, though, we're on to Arcanist and Scholar. There are no summoner changes, interestingly enough. Now, Virus is when the effect of Virus expires, enemies will now be granted antibody, making them immune to the effect for 60 seconds. This is overall nerf to Virus. Just means you can't chain viruses in a phase where you really need it. So you really have to think about where you want to place your viruses, and that goes for PvE and PvP. So it's definitely a nerf to the skill overall, but I can see the thought process behind it. Arcanist also has the Bane change. The range was increased from 5 yalms to 8 yalms. Thank goodness. The range on that skill was so stupid. Enemies could be standing right next to each other, and you would still miss just because of how little the range was and where the center of the enemy actually was. Also, when a target's Bio 2, and Miasma are spread to nearby enemies, their durations will not be reset if longer than the original effect duration. That's a nerf to Contagion, guys. That's a big nerf to Contagion. Because that means that if you Contagion your spell before you Bane it, you won't get the extra effect. You won't get the extra 15 seconds. So that I didn't see that coming. I'm surprised. They said they were going to lift the cap off of it. I'm wondering. I don't see that changing here. Maybe they're just going, maybe because it wasn't on the tooltip, they're just like, oh, we'll just secretly patch it in. But that might mean that they still only hit 3 targets. Maybe they want to see if this change in power it gives them more strength, but I think it's just an overall nerf. A lot of good summoners would really use that whole Contagion to Bane thing, and it was a great way of doing AoE DPS and just being able to spam AoEs after that, but I guess it's kind of weird. Sustain will now use MP instead of HP. I don't know how I feel about that entirely. I don't really see a problem with Sustain being HP. No matter what, it eats a global cooldown, and it reduces your damage should you ever need to cast it, but I guess it's just because they didn't want to have the summoners, or I guess they didn't want them to be losing HP that they would need cured up afterwards just to heal their pet. I don't know what the thought process is behind that. Feel free to comment that below, because I would definitely appreciate seeing some of your comments on that. And finally, change to Lustrate. Lustrate got buffed by 5%. HP recovered has been increased from 20% to 25%. That is massive. Ooh, oh my goodness. Wow, that's a big buff. That doesn't sound like a big buff, but with the amount of Lustrates you do over a fight, that's a lot more healing, guys. Now, there are some more changes here below that I hadn't read yet that I weren't aware were present, so we're going to go through these really quick. Thunder can no longer be used as an additional skill by Disciples of Magic. With additional actions that can no longer be used have a unique mark. Please remove them from your action list. Okay, so that's just clarification on that. Now, Bane here, it seems like Bane aren't getting the buff that we thought they were. Now correctly states that Bio, Biotu, and Miasma are spread to a maximum of 3 targets. So they're not lifting the limit target on it, it seems, which really, really sucks. I don't know why they do that. I guess they want to see if in its new... No, it's not going to be any stronger. It just doesn't make any sense to me, guys. I just don't get it. They said that they understood why players didn't want it, but with the nerf to Contagion and not changing that, it seems silly to me at this point. They should just really lift the cap on that, since most of Summoner's damage is not instantaneous and Black Mage's is. Now, the period of immobility upon being revived has been reduced, and characters are granted temporary invulnerability, but it will be lost upon using actions. So does that mean you have it until you start using actions? Interesting, interesting, interesting. We will have to see in patch 2.1 exactly how that ends up playing out. The effects of the following actions can now be overwritten by the original caster, regardless of a difference in potency. And then they didn't list any of the any of the abilities. So, yeah. Basically, I'm just assuming damage over time effects can be overwritten. Pretty much now, regardless of their strength. So, it no longer it does still take the snapshot, but if you want to clip your dots early, you can do that now regardless of the previous dot. So I guess that eases players a little bit. It's a little bit more forgiving now, the system. I don't know how much of a fan I am of it, but a lot of people were asking for it, so I guess I'm okay with it. I'll just have to learn to clip all my dots, because if you don't clip your dots in this game, you almost always lose damage, except in, I'm sure, very niche cases now that this has become a change. Oh well, we'll see what happens. Status Affliction resistances will now begin counting after the last corresponding Status Affliction is received, as opposed to when it wore off. So that means that you can chain CCs together much more reliably, but you'll also tick the diminishing returns a lot quicker. I'm also imagining that this status effect thing is also under the effect of overwritten by the original caster, meaning if you stun somebody for 6 seconds and then you stun them again for 3, it'll go down to 3 immediately, as opposed to stunning them and saying it was resisted because you didn't wait long enough. So definitely going to see that. Damage over time actions that are target the ground, such as Flaming Arrow and Shadow Flare, will now break, sleep, and bind effects. So can't do that anymore. People have been talking about doing that for a long time. Can't do it anymore. Simple as that. Players will now receive the additional effects of other players' actions, even if the damage is completely nullified by statuses such as Stoneskin and Adloquium. So I'm guessing that's a PvP change. Players will now receive additional effects of other players' actions. So yeah, that's definitely got to be a PvP change, because that basically means that even if you have Stoneskin on, you can be silenced, you can be slept, you can be knocked back. Basically, that's what it means. It's a 100% PvP change, so I guess that's good. I guess that means that even by negating the damage, you can't negate the CC, which I guess that's good for balancing purposes. When restarting a duty, the limit break gauge will now reset. I wonder if that means that when you, yeah, that has to mean that when you, I guess you wipe on a boss and you restart the duty, that you can't use the limit break before going in again, like the tank limit break, and then start the fight with the tank limit break. That's got to be what that means. I don't know if that's really a big change. I think that mostly affects primals and, like, because you can't do that. I mean, you can still do that in Coil, but I wonder if that's counted as the duty restarting. I guess it's hard to say. I guess we'll just have to see it in practice. When multiple characters are playing the same class job in the party, the gauge for level 2 and level 3 limit breaks will now fill more slowly. This is definitely to encourage job diversity in content. So hopefully that's a significant change, because it's ridiculous how stacking jobs works right now. I guess that encourages people to not bring like 4 monks to everything, but if 4 monks are so strong, why not just destroy it without the limit break? I guess we'll just have to see how it ends up playing out. New monsters will be added. Awesome. Enemies in instance dungeons will now yield more EXP. Awesome. In light of the above increased EXP yield, link bonuses no longer apply in instant dungeons. Aww. Well, that's a bit of a nerf, but I guess in the end it's not really. I guess the overall it's a buff, but we'll see. The movement of bosses and certain enemies is no longer affected by NPC position. That means that if those of you who have done turn 5 or have done any boss, if you place your fairy next to an enemy boss, it will move. The boss will move if it gets too close to it. I guess that won't happen anymore, which is really good. The potency of Dorme Chimera's Ram's Voice and Dragon's Voice in the quest A Relic Reborn has been reduced. I guess so it doesn't one-shot people anymore, so I guess if you miss a silence, you're not going to guaranteed wipe. I'm really okay with that. It's been almost 4 months since the content come out. It's okay to nerf it at this point. The maximum number of statuses that can be afflicted upon notorious monsters has been raised to 60. Awesome, but you can still only see 30. So I guess that means that now we can actually apply dots on Behemoth and Odin. Sweet! And that you can actually apply dots to all enemies in the Binding Coil. we'll see how that actually... I still think this could be problematic, but we'll see how it ends up planning out. The hunting log now displays the requirements for unlocking higher ranks, just quality of life change. Players will no longer lose the effects of food items upon being incapacitated. Perfectly okay with that. Actually, no, I'm not, because that's going to ruin the food market to some degree. The following changes have been made to pet actions. The away command has been added to the sub-command menu when selecting your pet. When selecting Obey and Steady, pets will only execute actions when commanded and will remain in the steady stance. So they fixed that bug. Very good, because that bug was massive. The Fairy Eos will no longer automatically cast Whispering Dawn when set to Obey. Thank goodness. The Fairy Celine will now use Phalite when set to Sick. Okay. Pet action help text is now displayed in the same format. Help text for pet actions that are not used when the set to Obey command have been revised. Pet positioning will no longer affect the movements of enemies and vice versa. All that's pretty self-explanatory. All of it's... I'm not big on a pet class player, but all of it seems like it's very positive in terms of changes. The following changes have been made to Chocobo companions. Players can now examine them to view their rank and barding, and the enmity generated by the tank Chocobo abilities has been increased. I guess that's to actually make them able to tank something. Wonder by how much it was increased. Character motions have been added for the effect of sleep. Character motions have been added for the effect of not back. That's good, because the effects right now look kind of ridiculous. And then they changed the motions and effects for a bunch of different abilities. Whoa, what's this? Bravura Zenith and Holy Shield Zenith. I wonder what that means. I wonder if those are just the glow effects. I don't know. I guess we'll just have to see. I don't know yet. Dot damage now affects objects such as crates and barricades. The frequency at which a player's position is updated has been increased. So those are all the changes for the classes and battle. Pretty much those are all the battle changes. Overall, I'm really happy with a lot of these changes. I know some of you are probably going, yo, Mr. Happy is QQing over those bard nerfs. Not really. It doesn't really change the way I play the job anymore, and it means I don't have to cast Reign of Death as often. Thank goodness. That was so annoying having to cast Reign of Death all that time. I'm not worried at all. I still see bards as majorly useful. Dragoons, definitely a huge buff. Monks, maybe too much of a buff. Definitely happy with some of the little quality of life changes like Paladin. The fact that Paladin has so few changes and Bard has so few changes just goes to show you how good the jobs already are and how little changes they probably actually need. Probably actually, totally a word. Really enjoyed the Conjurer changes. I think that it definitely is going to make more skilled healers shine. Healers who absolutely understand their skills, like Cure 3, using their Cure 3 procs, using their Medica 2s, not spamming certain spells, definitely, like Holy. I think we're definitely going to see a lot more skill pulling into this. Thunder not being able to be used was kind of lame. Blizzard 2 nerfs were kind of lame. The Scathe nerf was really lame. I think all the Black Mage changes, other than Freeze, were pretty lame. And the Arcanist changes were underwhelming at best. I mean, the Scholar change is okay, the Lustrate buff, but the Virus nerf, the Bane nerf, and the Sustain change, just, I didn't see, I guess Virus makes sense, but Bane, man, I don't understand why they're not just making Bane hit all the targets. I just don't understand it. I get it, maybe its potential damage is way higher, but it's a damage over time skill. Like, don't give it that many weaknesses that it already doesn't do damage instantaneously. It's got a crap range, so spreading it's really hard. Even though they buffed it, it'll probably still have trouble reaching certain enemies. And then making it only able to hit 3 targets? Do you just want to scream that Black Mages are better at AoEing? I guess we'll have to see these changes in action to see if the increased range makes up for the fact that it can only hit 3 targets, but sincerely, I doubt it. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, favorite, subscribe, and share for more Final Fantasy XIV videos and information. Also, be sure to check out the patch notes yourself. I will be doing more videos about my thoughts on the patch notes. I will also be streaming my thoughts on the patch notes in the coming hours. Going to be going live in a few hours. Obviously, by the time you see this, I might have already been live, or I might be live right this second. So be sure to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch to know when I'm streaming. Going to be streaming 2.1. Going to be streaming every day up until 2.1. So definitely keep up on my Facebook and my Twitter to make sure you know when I'm going live. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.